Welcome to The Human Experience, a podcast about the stories we live out every day and the importance of championing the vulnerability and courage of the storyteller. I'm your host, Jennifer Peterkin, and it was through my own lived story of experiencing domestic violence that this podcast was created. By traveling the globe and interviewing each guest in person, I am convinced now more than ever that stories have the power to change the world. Thank you for being here. In a world full of noise, to listen with intention is an act of resistance. Karen, thank you so much for welcoming me into your home to sit down and have this interview with me. I am so thrilled to hear more about your story. I've read just a snippet about you, but I would love to hear your story in your own words.
Well, thank you for interviewing me.
So, we're in New Jersey.
Mhm.
And I just realized you haven't been here that long. So when I say, where does your story begin? What does that mean to you?
Begins in Darien, Connecticut.
Okay. Is that where you grew up?
Yes, I moved there when I was just 3.
Oh, wow. Okay. Where were you born?
I was born in Norwalk, Connecticut.
So definitely a Northeast gal over here.
Yes,
Through and through.
I was glad to come back to the Northeast. I was in Ohio for a while after I got married because my former husband had a job at the time with Procter & Gamble
Hmm.
in Cincinnati.
So you grew up in Connecticut.
Uh,
What was your family life like?
Mixed. The first 10 years of my life were really wonderful. I was very close to my mother. My dad was an alcoholic.
Mm.
He later stopped drinking when he was 40, which was a good thing. But I was very close to my mother. She was really my best friend, and everyone loved my mother, and all the neighborhood kids and everything. She was very, very young. But a tragedy struck when I was just 12. My father was having an affair, and that really broke my mother's heart. It's not a reason to commit suicide, but she did. And my world changed. And when I was 12, in December, I hugged my mother goodbye. And normally when I did that, I would turn and she would be gone from the window. But this time she stayed there and waved. And each time I turned, she waved. And I walked across the neighbor's yard. I was on my way to the bus stop. And I climbed over the stone wall. And I turned and my mother was still waving, still waving. And I got on the bus. I went to school. And at lunch period, I was in my homeroom class because of overcrowding. And Mr. Deuce was in charge of the lunch period, which was kind of grumpy. Nobody really liked him. And a secretary from the office came into the lunchroom and whispered to Mr. Luce. And the two of them kept looking at me. And then when they left, Mr. Luce said, "Karen, when you finish your lunch, go immediately to the office. They want to see you. He needs to talk with you." And so I jumped up. He said, "No, finish your lunch." Well, all I had to finish was an ice cream sandwich. So I bolted that down, even though I didn't want to have it. And I went into the office. And they said, they want you at home. And so I went home, and my grandmother was there, and she should have been in New York City. But of course, when she got the news about my mother, she came right back. So she met me, and she was very flustered. She said, "Mom had a nervous breakdown, but she'll be okay." And somehow I felt comforted by that because I'd heard other people had a nervous breakdown in Darien, and I thought, well, she'll just get better. At that point, I didn't know she committed suicide. I learned that later. But she died 2 days later, and that was, a horrible tragedy for me because my mother was my world. So everything changed, and I would go to sleep at night, and hug this stuffed toy cat that had a rubbery, smiley face. It was a toy cat that a friend of my father's had given me. And then the smiley face just wore off with my tears. And so it was very, very difficult. And, but the good thing was I was close to my grandmother, my mother's mother. So I would go into New York on weekends to see her. I also had a sister who was two, and I was close to her. I was like a mother to her. So somehow you patch together a new life. You don't think it's possible, but it is,
Yeah.
I prayed a lot. I had a rock garden outside my window, a big, big rock. It was about 5 feet by 4 feet in the shape of a heart. And the rock had a hole in it. But I would pray the rock. I would plant daffodils and violets that I got from the woods. And to me, that was my spiritual place to go to. I was a member of the Presbyterian Church, but even though, as I'll tell you, I am involved organized religions in a big way, I was never religious in the sense of a religion. It was more spiritual, and that being outdoors brought me comfort and praying and just flowers that I planted. And the violets meant a lot to me. And that would be my spiritual place to pray. My dad then met another woman, and he married her because he wanted, I don't know that he loved her, but he wanted to get his life back together. And that was his way of doing it. Yeah, but it was an unhappy marriage for both of them. And they divorced within just 4 years of being married. But I wanted to be a nurse, and after my mother's death, I realized now I had this great urge to help people. Once you've experienced pain like that, wanna you wanna help others so that they don't experience that pain. So my way of doing that was to become a nurse, but my stepmother said, you know, I was a nurse, you'll never be a nurse. And so that dream was shattered. Even though I knew the nursing school, I wanted to go to St. Luke's in Manhattan, and I was involved in the Future Nurses Club. In high school, I was a candy striper in a hospital. So all those things, I wanted to become a nurse because that was going to be my way of helping. But just like that, my dream was shattered because my stepmother persuaded my father not to pay for nursing school. So I had to pivot my career, and I studied business administration. And then after my divorce, I got a job with the Warner Lambert Company. Uh, I was in charge of developing sweepstakes and couponing events for products like Schick razors, Listerine mouthwash, and Lubriderm lotion. Now, that was a far cry from helping people, but Faye was about to intervene because I would go into New York frequently at meetings. And this one day, I was about to pass a woman who sat out in front of Grand Central Station, and she was elderly. She was probably in her late 70s. She was frail. She sat on a crate, and she leaned over, and her head was always pointed down, and I had seen her before, but it always passed her by, as I did anyone who was homeless in New York, because my grandmother had told me, don't go near those people, They're bummed. They want to be that way. Sometimes they have thousands of dollars packed in their bag. And this one particular day, it was just something about this woman. She looked so depressed, and I had known depression. And so I ran across the street and I bought a ham and cheese and an orange juice. And when I came back, I handed it to her, and she looked up at me and she said, "God bless you. Thank you so much. I haven't eaten since yesterday," in her own dignified voice. And I introduced myself, and she introduced herself. Her name was Millie, and we talked a bit. And I asked her, about how she ended up homeless, and she told me about her husband who had died and who was a chef. And she seemed like the kindest soul, and she really opened my eyes and my heart to people experiencing homelessness. Because now, when I saw homeless people, and they weren't really homeless people, they were people experiencing homelessness. They had a face and a name. I couldn't look at them the same way they had. So I went on to my meeting, and I couldn't tell you. I can't remember too much about the meeting. All I could do was think about Millie. And when I got home, I told my two sons about Millie, and my younger sons, who now had a 30-year career with different nonprofits, said to me, "Mom, let's go into the city and find more people like Millie and give them sandwiches." So that started us making sandwiches every other Sunday, and we would go into New York to deliver them. And we soon saw that people sitting at Port Authority bus terminal they were not waiting for their bus; they were simply homeless. And so we brought the sandwiches in as a way of saying we cared, because the sandwich became a vehicle that allowed us to do it. We got to know people by name, and they waited for us. So we hope we see you. And we just learned about their stories, and we learned their names. They were no longer homeless people. They were Alvin and Steve and Patricia and Louise and Arthur. Arthur was a World War II veteran who kept medals pinned the inside of his jacket. He would tell my boys war stories, you know. And so these were real people that we got to know. I no longer saw them as homeless. Primarily, I saw them first as people who have gone through, one tragedy after another. May have been a mental health issue or substance abuse or lack of family support, but they were very much alone, and our hearts reached out to them. And so before Thanksgiving, I thought I'd like to invite them back to my house for Thanksgiving. So, at this time I wasn't seeing things so clearly, or maybe I was seeing things clearly for the first time, but these were our friends. And so why not invite them back to our house? So about 3 weeks before Thanksgiving, I went in and gave them little invitations with bus tickets, inviting them to our house. And everybody said yes. There were 8 people we invited, and we took the bus, and I had a neighbor help me, so my car and his car. And we picked up our friends from the bus station in Summit, New Jersey. And, I don't consider myself a good cook. In fact, I never even cooked a Thanksgiving dinner before. But with the help of neighbors, it all came together. And it was just one of the most meaningful Thanksgiving dinners ever, because we were really being thankful for our new friends and thankful for what we had as a family. And just the conversation was easy. There's no room for put on airs or anything like that. It was just free flowing conversation. So after that experience of having friends back to her house for Thanksgiving, I began to think, well, what's going on in my own county of Union, New Jersey? And I began volunteering at shelters and soup kitchens and learned that families were the fastest growing segment of the homeless population.
Wow.
Yeah, but you don't see families. They're invisible. But, the woman you pass on the street, who was pushing a baby stroller and with an 8-year-old by her side, she was homeless, was leaving a shelter, or the woman who hands you your order at Burger King and says, "Have a nice day." She's homeless, but yet she's working, but she has no telltale signs of homelessness, because the core issue of homelessness is poverty and the lack of affordable housing. And so families are able to keep themselves together and out of sight for the most part, because they don't want to be seen, because if they're seen, their children could be taken from them and placed in foster care. In fact, in New Jersey, at that time, the number one reason in Union County that children were taken from their parents and placed in foster care was not abuse or neglect. It was simply homelessness.
Wow.
Yeah. That's shocking.
It is.
Yeah.
I
So
think we have this idea in our head of what homelessness is, or even what foster care is, and why it happens. And this just goes to show we really don't know what we
No.
think we know.
That's true.
We have a lot of preconceived notions.
That's true.
Yeah.
It's easier just to say homeless people are those people that have the tell signs of homelessness. The man sleeping on the subway, great. The woman rummaging through the trash can for something to eat. And those are the homeless people. But certainly not the woman who hands you your burger order at McDonald's. So yeah, we have preconceived notions, but 35% of all those who are homeless are members of families, and are largely, though, unseen, because many of them are the working poor.
Yes.
Mhm.
And I think that's so important, the working poor,
Mhm.
because that's another preconceived notion, right? Is that people just don't work, and so that's
Yeah,
why they're without homes.
yeah,
And
they would
it's just
just
not
get a
true.
job.
Yeah.
But so many of them are working, but they're underemployed, meaning they're not making enough wages to afford housing, or they, lose their housing because of it. But then along comes an illness, a divorce, you know, and before they know it, they get behind in their rent, and they end up homeless.
Yeah. I think that's such another important distinction as well, is that so many of us are one bad situation away from being
Mhm.
in that same exact position, right? Because there are so many things that could happen. And, like you said, illness, the state of our
Mhm.
healthcare is such that people go bankrupt over medical bills. You just never know what's going to happen. And so to think about people that are homeless as, it's not all one thing, right? Not everybody is struggling with the same thing or has been through the same thing. And regardless, I think that housing should be a basic right. But the way we think and talk about it as well is important, in terms of, you know, people lose their homes for all sorts of different reasons. And they also don't ask for help for all sorts of different reasons. So tell me about how you came to, you started with Millie.
Right.
You then built a pretty big project out of all of this.
Yeah, well, I didn't intend to do that, but
That's always the way.
yeah. So what I was seeing in New Jersey and seeing the families, I thought, does a religious community now? I mean, it was business as usual for the religious community. They were religious, and they made their donations to soup kitchens or shelters, but they really didn't know about homeless families. So I planned a conference on family homelessness, and I invited the religious community of all faiths. That's something I believe in too. And all faiths have a responsibility to care in some way for the poor. And I expected 100 people at the conference, and 200 showed up.
Wow.
For an all-day conference on Saturday, on October 27th, 1984. And that was really something that told me that people really do care and want to make a difference. And we had different workshops. Bob Hayes from the Coalition for the Homeless spoke, who founded that. He's a Wall Street attorney, and he was seeing lots of people who were homeless on the streets. And he mounted a class action suit on behalf of homeless men. It was very successful. So he spoke. And then Wendy, a homeless woman, spoke, who lived in a suburban town of Cranford. And she had a son, and she was pregnant with another baby. And she was staying at a shelter, and that shelter said you had to get out during the day. And, you had to walk or wherever you were going, but you couldn't stay in the shelter. And because of that, she walked and she walked, and she gave birth prematurely to a little baby, Justin. And Justin was in the pediatric ward, what do you call it?
The NICU?
The NICU, yeah, for quite some time. And Wendy was able to leave the hospital, but her son had to stay in the NICU. But he was finally released. And the only place she could go to was a motel where people donated some money, and she was able to stay in the motel. But the doctor said, now, I've got a heart monitor on your son, Justin, and if the heart monitor goes off, call the rescue squad and get him to the hospital, ASAP. And sure enough, one night, the monitor did go off, and she called the rescue squad. But by the time the rescue squad got there, he had turned blue and he passed away. And so at the conference, she said, and had I had a home and didn't have to walk, little Justin may have been with us. And so, but we looked at that and we said, what was that community failure, And that motivated us to do more. And that we then began meeting at Christ Church in Summit every other Tuesday to plan something. And I couldn't find one church to be a full-time shelter, and I couldn't find a building to be a full-time shelter. So I organized what I thought was second best at the time. I said, why don't we do together what any one of us can do alone? And so I found 11 churches and one synagogue that agreed to rotate on a weekly rotational basis, providing shelter and meals for 14 people. 14 because our van ended up having 14 seats.
Okay.
Yeah. But it was also a manageable number for the congregations. And, that first year, 70% of the families find housing. And that's really high because most shelters don't even don't measure the number of people finding housing. They count just bed nights. But we were experiencing success. Today, 81% of family promise guests find housing within about 9 weeks.
Wow.
Which is truly amazing. And that's attributed to the good case management, the guests, being motivated to find housing, but also the volunteers who have contacts who help. Because once the volunteers get involved, they go above and beyond and want to get more involved, and they have needs for housing, or they accompany a guest looking for housing, and all that makes a difference.
Yeah.
But the main thing that came out of the program, beyond the success and the cost effectiveness, is that families in the program felt hope for the first time. They felt noticed and cared for and loved. And that you can't put a price tag on that. That helped boost their self-esteem and got them back on their right track.
Yeah. So Family Promise is the name of the organization
Yes.
that you started. And I love how organically it started, right? You didn't just sit down one day and decide, I'm going to solve homelessness and I'm going to start this organization. It really fed itself as you had these relational interactions. And I also love what you said about, when you asked, was this a community failure? I think that's a question that we can and should be asking far more often than we do, right? Just the responsibility of a community to take care of each other.
It's true.
So what it started was these 11 churches and one synagogue, and they would rotate. Is that still how it functions, in that you have churches helping to, temporarily
Yes.
house? Okay.
Yeah, that's still, we have that. But we also have static site shelters. After the pandemic, people were, they stopped sheltering within their buildings because of COVID. But now some are doing it, some are not. Some have a static site, some have transitional housing. They have prevention, intervention, and stabilization, where they work with families and stay with them after they're housed. But it grew organically because after I started the one in Union County, New Jersey, folks in Essex County and Morris County, neighboring counties on either side of Union County, said, how do you start this? And I work with them, and they started their own programs. And then other communities said, how do you get this going? And then I saw that I needed sort of a sales force, or folks that would introduce program in new areas. So I had interns first do needs assessments, and they would call shelters in a community and ask what the situation was. I had interns do it because if somebody from our office called, social servicing, these could feel threatened by a new initiative. It's hard to think of, but it happens. So by having interns do it, they were just doing their internship project. And so they would be able to get a clear reading on whether there was a need or not. And in most all communities, there was a need. And so then once I knew the need, I could prioritize the locations. Now I needed some people to introduce the program to, say, for instance, in Indianapolis, we know that areas of great need don't typically have the host congregations. I learned that early on when I was working in Union County, and I went to Elizabeth pastors, and they said, "You kidding me? Half of our congregation is either homeless or on the verge of homelessness." So I knew that we needed to find people who would introduce the program and and bring it about in a non-threatening way. So I trained people to introduce sort of our sales force, call them Family Promise Associates, and they would go to a community like Indianapolis and go to Meridian Hills, an affluent suburb, because that's where we had experience with this taking off in the suburbs. And these Family Promise Associates would introduce the program to each congregation one by one, and then write up a report as to the response, for the community as well as each congregation. We would then ask the congregation to host, one congregation that had ample parking lot and was well received by the community on the whole to host a community meeting. Now it was Reverend Jack Williams from Meridian Hills that was inviting people to a community meeting, and then I would fly out there and speak and present the program along with a volunteer from a nearby affiliate, and it was usually very well received, and we would help them form a core group, and we wrote manuals, and in fact the Kellogg Foundation said, I think it's wonderful how you've helped so many people experiencing homelessness, but what I'm interested in is how you've been able to recruit so many volunteers, because it was around this single problem, but it was something they could address. And so Jill Oro's head of philanthropy, and for the head of philanthropy and volunteerism for the Kellogg Foundation, just was so impressed in what we were doing that he gave us a grant of $150,000 to develop videos and manuals. So now we had the tools to go along with it. So, that's more or less how it grew until today. We have these 200 affiliates across the country, and we've helped close to 1 million people and more than 1 million volunteers involved over time. So it's really miraculous. One, there's a great need for shelter and support services for families experiencing homelessness. But I think there's a great need within all of us, if we go deep enough, that we really urge to yearn to make a difference. And that's what Family Promise allows people to do right in their own community, to make a difference in the lives of others.
Yeah. And I think in your own community is an important piece of that.
Yes.
Because especially, religious organizations, evangelical organizations in particular, which I grew up in, is very focused on, world reach sometimes at the expense of our local communities.
Yeah.
And I do think that some people just don't know what the needs are or how to get involved. And not that they couldn't figure it out, but I think when you present people with a way to get involved that's actionable, that
they want to do it.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's fantastic that you had such a community response. I was visiting your website earlier. I mean, you have a lot of people involved. It's not small operations over here.
No, it's grown and grown.
Yeah.
And then they've added programs too, all different kinds of programs.
Yeah. When did you kind of realize, okay, this is what I'm doing like full time now? Because that's not where you started, obviously.
No. Well, I became the first executive director of Family Promise. I just knew where I saw that if it could start in Union County, Morris County, Essex County, Indianapolis, Philadelphia, it could go anywhere as long as there was a need on the part of families experiencing homelessness, a need on the part of people wanting to make a difference. And so we had a formula worked out. And I said to myself, wherever we go, as long as we know what the needs are, this is possible. And so then it was just a matter of putting together a team and a staff to introduce the program and, help with volunteer training, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Because we would go out and train volunteers. So it developed organically, but so I didn't have a master plan. I never had a master plan. I went on my instincts, and how I wanted to help.
Your good instincts.
Yeah, yeah.
I think you were destined because, you said from a young age you wanted to help people. And
Yes.
even though that first path was really, cruelly shut down, you knew you were
Yeah.
destined for this at some juncture in your life.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely wanted to help people, and nothing was going to stop me
Yeah.
there.
Good.
Yeah.
And so you've been doing this under the umbrella of Family Promise since the 80s?
Yeah, well, I retired in January of 2016.
Okay.
Yeah, and I felt good about that because I had Klaus Ehlers work with me for 20 years, developing new affiliates. He was in charge of developing new affiliates, so he was very good at what he did. So I said, Klaus, I'm going to retire. Would you be willing to step up? And he said, yes, he would be honored to. And he just did a really great job, fantastic job. So I was able to retire in 2016.
Yeah.
So once I retired, I was looking forward to spending more time with my grandchildren and traveling. And I went to India. That was one of my first trips.
Was it?
Yeah, it was beautiful.
For you.
Yeah. And then I had a small condo in Miami Beach, and I would spend time there. And on 2019, February 12th, I was relaxing by the pool and getting ready for my cryotherapy appointment. Do you know what cryotherapy is? Extreme cold temperatures. You go in this tank, this vertical tank, and you're in there for 3 minutes. And it's very, very cold. And it's supposed to give you mental and physical health benefits and energize you at the same time. So I had done this about 30 times, both in Summit, New Jersey, as well as Miami Beach. And, it was always, a good experience. But this time I walked into the area, and the receptionist said, I have a new therapist who's been well trained, but she's been here with us for only 4 weeks. But they reassured me she was fine and trained. But for some reason, the temperatures got beyond frozen cold. It was like really, she made it so cold that I don't recall anything, but she said I kept saying, I'm cold, I'm so cold. So at 1 minute rather than 3 minutes, she opened the door to the chamber, but thinking I would walk out, but I was frozen. So I fell out like a popsicle and hit my head on a raised ledge, which caused a spinal cord injury. And so just like that, so I had the presence of mind to ask for a phone, and I called my 2 sons who came down right away to Miami Beach and to the hospital I was being taken to, which was the trauma center hospital, which was good. So they operated on me, and I had what you call an incomplete injury, which means I have injuries that are different parts of my body where the spinal cord is captured, squeezed, but not severed. And so I can move everything. I can move my legs. I can move everything but my right arm. But I finished a book, Meant for More, Following Your Heart and Finding Your Purpose. I was able to finish my book once I had the accident, and I was able to start painting, and the paintings on the wall. or mine than I've done.
No way.
Yeah.
They're beautiful. I've noticed the paintings, but I didn't even read the artist.
Yeah.
They are beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you. So I started painting again, but I'm right-handed, so I've learned to paint with my left hand, which is a little more impressionistic, but I still can do it. And I've also learned to walk with something called an RJO. It's a platform walker, and with the help of my physical therapist, I'm able to walk down the hall, which is good because my legs are getting stronger.
Mm.
So, yeah, I mean, I plan to walk, but my happiness isn't dependent upon my walking
Sure.
because I'm still Karen. I'm just, my body's broken, but my spirit and my heart are not. So,
Well, that's clear.
yeah, yeah, that's what people say. Yeah,
Yeah.
So, yeah,
So you were already writing your book when you had your accident?
Yeah, I
Okay.
was.
Did that
able to finish it.
change the trajectory of your book?
Not really. I
Okay.
just added in the end, about my accident.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's, a not insignificant amount of time that you've been
Mhm.
post-accident, right?
Right.
And you had a few years after retirement where you were doing what you kind of thought you were going to be doing, right?
Right.
And so obviously after an accident like that, it changes your life in the physical sense of what you thought you were going to be doing,
Right.
right? So how was that for you mentally afterwards?
Mhm. No, it was all right. Just continued on, even though, I say as my body was broken, my spirit was not. So, I just continued doing what I was doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
For you. So you were in Miami at the time, but you also still had a place up north as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So at a house, in northern New Jersey, 2 floors. So when I had the accident, I knew I wasn't going to be able to go up and downstairs.
Sure.
So my sons helped me sell the house. And that's when I rented this apartment,
Okay.
which is ideal because it's right near a big pond. I don't know if you saw when you came in.
Yeah.
So I just can go out my door and go around the pond, and I see people that I know. And
Oh, nice.
yeah, it's
It's
nice.
beautiful here.
Yeah, I think it's really beautiful.
Yeah. I'm a fan of this area. Just, the Northeast East in general. I think it's just a really beautiful
It is.
place.
It's a well-kept secret because
It is.
people think New Jersey is not nice,
I think, people think of the Northeast and they think of the big cities, but there's so much nature around too that's so
There is.
beautiful.
Yeah,
Yeah. So do your sons live around here?
they do. Both sons live within 20 minutes of where I am.
Amazing.
So that's
And how
really
many
good.
grandchildren do you have?
I have 5,
Love it.
ranging in age from 15 to 26.
Okay. That's great. So I'm assuming you get to see them fairly frequently
I
then.
do, yeah,
That's
every once a week, yeah. Even busy lives.
Yeah, my mom lives for, being the grandmother. So I can only imagine. But yeah, it's an extremely special relationship. And,
It is.
having spent so much of your life focused on keeping the dignity of families intact, it just makes me so happy to hear that you're able to live that out yourself, in your retirement, that you
Right.
have that for yourself too.
I do.
Yeah.
And I also felt like before people would say, "Aren't you amazed at all that you accomplished?" And I couldn't really take it in, but now I feel that I can because I'm not so active running here and there. I can take it in when I think of the families that have been helped,
Yeah. Able to reflect now that you're not in the day to day.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's a great gift to me.
Are you ever disappointed that you never actually became a nurse?
Oh, no. Because if I became a nurse, maybe if I were lucky, I might be in charge of one floor.
Yeah.
but I've helped so many more people. So I would think it's intentional. When God allows one door to close, he opens another, and he opened a big, big door for me.
Yeah.
It allowed me to develop family promise.
Yeah. So you had briefly mentioned COVID and kind of how things shifted for Family Promise then. And I know you were retired, but obviously you're still very much connected. So how did that affect your project? How did that affect Family Promise?
Well, the congregations couldn't host during COVID. So most, shut down from sheltering. But when COVID was over, most of them came back to shelter in their buildings, but some did not. And they looked for alternative ways to be involved. So some of our affiliates had a static site shelter with mentoring and other kind of programs around it. But some still did the rotational program.
Okay. So, I mean, just thinking about it in the sense of, even the phrase shelter in place, right? That was the phrase that everybody was using, to shelter in place. And, if somebody doesn't have a place, what do they do? Like, what does that look like for somebody?
They don't have the place.
Yeah. If they're living in homelessness, I, during something like the pandemic, which was so foreign to all of us, hadn't experienced anything like that before, at least in the United States. What happens to people that are not able to necessarily have a home to go to shelter in?
Yeah, while they're on the street or doubling or tripling up with friends or family members who do have a place.
Yeah. It's just something to keep in mind, when we're all complaining about the homes that we have to stay in, not being able to socialize with each other. And to a degree, I understand the importance of that, but there's so many other nuances to it that we wouldn't necessarily think about if that's not a struggle we've ever had before. Yeah. How do you view, you did this for decades. How do you view the attitudes towards homelessness as a societal responsibility over those decades that you've been working up till now?
Well, I think most people don't understand homelessness. Even the people who are chronically homeless and on the streets of, say, a city like New York City, they're either mentally ill or have substance abuse issues. And we have to have sympathy for them because they have a disease called mental health or substance abuse. And they have to get treatment for that. But that's not available, you know. And a lot of people don't know about homeless families because they're invisible.
Yeah. Do you feel like attitudes have changed? Do you think that people have gotten that any level of understanding has happened over the decades? Have we progressed in ways, and have we regressed in others?
Yeah, certainly. I think we've progressed. I think there's a greater understanding now, awareness of homelessness and homeless families and those who are chronically homeless.
Yeah.
There's a better understanding, but not a complete understanding.
Sure. I think, from my perspective, a lot of times we can view homelessness, and I would say poverty in general, as like a moral failure. And it's not, right?
Yeah.
But I think we can treat it as such, because then we can sit back and we don't have to do anything about it. If we can point and say, like, well, the reason that this is happening is because this person, isn't taking care of themselves, or is struggling with substance abuse, or, isn't getting help for their mental health, all of these things. And there's a much bigger conversation, I think, around poverty in general to be had, and that there are gaps in our communities where, you spoke to before, like people not having familial support, or people having illnesses, or somebody in their family dying, that was their only support system or the only income earner. And so there are all of these gaps that we don't necessarily take into account when we look at someone and say, what's wrong with them that they got to this place? And that's not fair, right?
Well, it's a systemic problem because there's not enough affordable housing. Like for every 4 people searching for affordable housing, there's only 1 unit available.
Wow.
And so, that's not the family's fault.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Of gaps in income versus cost of living and
all that. So, yeah, it's a systemic issue. And then, then people there's precipitating causes of homelessness like divorce and illness.
Yeah.
Substance abuse, that sort of thing.
Yeah. What do you hope for the future of Family Promise?
Well, I would hope that Family Promise, because it's shown how it can grow and engage so many people, it would continue to do that. And developing programs to serve homeless families and more. But also, we get involved in policy changes because we need to work hand in hand with government because they can change the systems that perpetuate poverty and homelessness through policies that help families out of homelessness. So I would like to see more partnership between government and the private sector.
Love that. Yeah.
And I think that's the only way it will be solved. Really, I don't think it will be solved just with volunteers, as important as they are.
Sure.
But volunteers can be the catalyst to engage government in a meaningful way that's cost effective.
Yeah. Yeah. And so now you're living your best life with your pond and your paintings. And when did you start painting? Like, is that something you did your whole life?
No. You see the picture of Venice on the wall there?
Yes.
Yeah, it started there. I was in 14. I was in art class, and I always used it as a time to fool around with my friends and not take painting seriously. But I loved my grandmother very much, and she was in love with Venice. And so I copied that picture of Venice. It was Turner painted the picture, and I copied his picture. But nevertheless, that takes some skill, which I didn't know I had.
It's very impressive. I'm looking at it right now. Yeah.
I was motivated to do it for my love for my grandmother. And that was my motivation. So I stopped fooling around. And so for 6 months in art class, I painted that and then framed it.
Wow.
Gave it to her. She was very happy. And so then I said, oh my gosh, I can paint, And then I went on and did other pieces.
Yeah. But I'm assuming life got busy and it's not something you did,
Not regularly, no, on a regular basis, no.
But you've been able to get back to that.
I have,
It's really
with my left hand.
How was learning to do that? I mean, I think it takes a lot of perseverance to want to sit down and learn like something like that, to reteach yourself something like that.
Right.
And I imagine it can be frustrating as well.
Well, it can be, yeah.
But yeah, so how was that for you?
It's okay. I haven't finished it, but you can see a painting there underneath the table to the left.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I paint impressionistic style. So
I love this style.
Yeah, it's just more impressionistic by virtue of how I paint.
This one with over here with the flowers, the wildflowers, just so beautiful. Yeah.
I did all that from my mind, and the big one from my mind too.
Is it a specific place?
No.
Yeah.
It's just a place in my mind.
Well, it looks very beautiful in your mind.
Yeah, thank you.
It's gorgeous.
Yeah. Well, actually, I was pretty depressed when I painted that big picture. I painted it during my son's nap times, but it was a painting that what was to come, something, even though I was depressed. You could see that picture, the big picture there is not depressive looking at all.
No.
It's joyful, and there's a pathway through the field up into the sky because it was painting of what was to come. And that's what's true.
Yeah.
That's what's worked out,
Yeah.
So it was prophetic in a way.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a question that I ask everybody at the end of each episode, which is, through the lens of your experience, what does compassion mean to you?
What does compassion mean to me? It means the giving of yourself from a very deep place that heals others when you offer this love to others. It's healing. Compassion is healing when it's authentic and it comes from a very deep place within inside of you.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree very much.
Good.
Well, you have a beautiful story and a beautiful outlook on life. And, I think that you had plenty of benchmarks in your life that could have taken you down a different path, a path of bitterness or resentment or anger, but you kept showing up and choosing what lies ahead. And not that makes it pretty all the time or anything like that, but I think your legacy speaks for itself in that way.
Thank you.
You have something to look back at, family promise, and your family, your sons, and your grandkids, and
that's true.
These things that will outlast you and leave behind the beautiful legacy that you've created. And I just think it's such a poignant reminder that we all have choices in life, and it may not seem important at the time, but we can look back maybe later in life and realize it's a good thing that I chose, to look for the hope and look for the goodness and try to maybe help instead of choosing a different path. So
I agree. Thank you, Jennifer.
It's been such a pleasure to sit and talk with you. Thank you for making the time for me.
You're welcome.
And again, for having me in your home.
Well, thank you for making the visit.
Yeah. And we'll link to Family Promise, of course, so people can check it out for themselves and see the work that's continuing to be done.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to The Human Experience. Everyone has a story, and I'd love to hear yours. So be sure to check out the show notes for more information about how to stay in touch. Do good and love well.